Alaska Public Media and Alaska's news source present Debate for the State, the U.S. House candidates. Here are your moderators, Lori Townsend and Mike Ross.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us for Debate for the State. We're coming to you live from Alaska Public Media. I'm Lori Townsend.
And I'm Mike Ross with Alaska's news source. Tonight we're going to pose a series of questions to the two major candidates for Alaska's lone seat in the U.S. House of Representatives, Representative Don Young and Democratic nominee independent Alyse Galvin. And welcome to you both this evening.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you so much.
Also, producer Taylor Perez will be gathering questions from social media. You'll notice we're a little more spread out than usual, and that's because of the pandemic. We'll also feature video questions, one from rural Alaska and one from a young Alaskan in Anchorage. Tune into Facebook Live immediately after this program for debate analysis.
Now, all the questions and answers will be timed tonight. The candidates will have the opportunity to ask questions of each other at certain points during the debate. The candidates will start with a 1-minute opening statement this evening. The starting order was determined a few moments ago by a toss of the coin. Let's get started this evening. And Ms. Galvin, your 1-minute opening statement, please.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. It's an honor to be here tonight. I'm Alyse Galvin, and I'm running to serve you for Congress. I'm a lifelong Alaskan, third generation. My family came up serving in World War II. And I'm also a former business owner. I'm a fierce education advocate and a proud mom of 4 children, and I want to make sure that they have an opportunity, as with all of our children, for a great life here in Alaska. Right now, Alaska is hurting because of this coronavirus, and certainly the epidemic, along with our fiscal crisis, has really collapsed our economy. We have work to do. I'll bring a different approach as Alaska's independent voice, serving in the majority. And I'm grateful to be able to have this opportunity to fight for Alaskans to get to good jobs, to fight to make sure that we have the education system connected to those, and to fight to make sure our healthcare costs are lowered and navigable. I look forward again to being your next Congresswoman.
Representative Young, your 1-minute opening statement.
First, let me thank KAKM. Channel 2 is really new at this, but thank you for being the moderators. I want to thank my staff is watching this, staff back in Washington, D.C. Pam, I'm on the stage. I do appreciate the fact that my staff works real well. We actually had 100,000 Alaskans call us last year or write us an email. So we've been working very hard, and I've been your congressman for the audience for, yes, 48 years, on my 48th year, and I've done the job. I've always done the job because I listen. I listen to what you want, and as far as being an advocate for all the things that my opponent said, I've already done that. And I'll continue to do it because that's what you asked me to do. I'm very frankly proud of being your congressman, have been, will be. And before I finish, I'd like to thank my best mate. That's my soulmate, that's my wife. She's been with me, she's watching this. I wish she was with me right now because she watches out for me, make sure I don't do anything wrong, which I usually do, so hold on. Thank you very much.
All right, Representative Young. We're going to start off tonight with a question about the pandemic. The number of COVID-19 cases is rising starkly across Alaska and around the country as well. Other than providing economic relief, what do you think the federal government could and should do to help contain the virus? Specifically, what role can Congress play in getting this pandemic under control? Representative Young.
Well, first we have passed 3 CARES bill. We've got a 4th one in the work, and if we can get rid of the Harrell's bill, which had a lot of money for non-pandemic issues, we'll be working on that side of it. And I am one that believes in states' rights. I think states should have the control of this program. I've said it before, the Dakotas have done it. I really believe it's very important the states have a real serious role. The cities, they rule themselves. There's a responsibility here. This pandemic has been going on now for approximately 6 months or a little longer. And it worries me a great deal because the economics of what affects Alaska, this great nation. You can't stay hunkered down and have a great nation. You have to get back to production. That's what I'm hoping to do. I really believe the states and the mayors can do the job better than the federal government can. I'm not a big supporter of federal government. I'm not a big supporter of the Congress getting in everyday activities of, very frankly, everyday lives.
Ms. Galvin, your 1-minute answer.
Alaska's hurting. We have our small businesses collapsing. We have over 49,000 of us unemployed. And I'm hearing from many for the first time filing for unemployment. That's not okay. This is the likes of something that none of us in our lifetime have experienced. We are in a deep recession, And the federal government, we're part of the United States of America, needs to be part of the help. Unfortunately, my opponent was at a fundraiser instead of there for the first vote for the coronavirus. I'll show up. It's important that we have our one representative there for us. And yes, I agree. I think we need more help for our small businesses. I think it's critical that we have that lifeline there so that when we do get past this, we will have an opportunity to come back. And we will get past it, but we need to make sure that there's help there.
Thank you. And because of the pandemic, the economy has lost more than 10 million jobs since February. This is according to the Economic Policy Institute. What specific measures can Congress offer to get our economy moving again? Ms. Galvin, we'll start with you. You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so the CARES Act was a good start. We know that the Senate has a bill, the House has passed a bill, which my opponent did not vote for. I would vote for anything that puts more help to Alaskans right now. We've got to make sure that our individuals are getting a little shot in the arm so that they can pay the rent, put food on the table. And we need to make sure our small businesses don't collapse so that once we get past this virus, we can restart again and renew our economy. So those are things that we can do right now. In the long term, what's really important is the next 2 years are going to be very critical, wherein we'll be discussing what investments are needed for the whole United States to get back to work. And I want to be at the table. They're deciding what infrastructure Alaska needs: roads, rail, certainly ports, and broadband internet. And I'll be there serving all Alaskans, bringing us back to work first.
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. Representative Young, you have 1 minute.
Well, we have one thing to consider as Alaskans. You know, I bought all this money, all this highway money that my opponent says I lost. We actually increase our monies each year because of my formula. We get about $4.50 for every dollar we put into the trust fund for infrastructure. But the role, now we have to consider one thing as Alaskans, as a nation. This money we're spending is very frankly money that's not real. It's printed money. We have spent more money in the last 6 months than the budget was in 1982, total. So we have to be very careful. Until we start producing real wealth again, we run a risk of running into inflation. And that scares me probably more than anything else. The pandemic's bad, but inflation would be worse. It affects the 401s, it affects the retirements, it affects Medicare, it affects all the Social Security. So we have to be very careful. The HEROES Act, which I voted against because it was $2.5 trillion, all that or most of that money went to New York, LA, Chicago, and all the bad cities that wanted to be bailed out, and I'm not for that. It's your tax dollar.
Another issue that affects the economy: where do you both stand on rolling back all or part of President Trump's tax cuts, and how do you plan to deal with the growing national debt? Representative Young.
Well, first, I'm not for you're going to repeal President Trump's tax cuts. You listen to Sleepy Joe, he's going to raise your taxes, cost you about $3,000 per family instead of saving $2,800. It's a bad idea from Joe Biden. It's a good idea Donald Trump passed it. We passed it in the House and the Senate. Keep that in mind. It was a joint effort, and I'm happy we did it, and I'm real proud of it.
Ms. Galvin, your position on the Trump tax cuts and the national debt?
Yeah, you bet. First, I want to address that a recent study says that Alaska has the 5th worst roads in the nation. That's because my opponent hasn't been in the room lately to fight for Alaskans. Also, we're 49th out of 50th in jobs growth. This was even before the virus. We've got some work to do. We need somebody in the room speaking to all of anyone who's serving in office. We need to work together. And that's what I'm going to be bringing as an independent, fighting for Alaskans first. In fact, I agree with my opponent. We've got some national threats, especially the National Democrats right now, may want to put up barriers for the natural resource development that we need to have in Alaska. With regard to the tax cuts, I think that the billionaires got a tax break that needs to go away. The billionaires, the millionaires. That said, also there are loopholes in there that need to be closed up that would actually bring back billions of dollars to America right away, and I support those.
All right, thank you. Mining is an issue on the minds of many Alaskans, especially in Bristol Bay and the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Here's Bethel Elder, Beverly Hoffman.
The proposed down and open pit mine is a great concern for many of us living on the Kuskokwim River, as we count on salmon and other food sources from the land and water. What is your position on open pit mines the size of Pebble and Donlin. They're very similar.
All right, thank you for that from Bethel. Ms. Galvin, you have 1 minute. Your thoughts on these mines.
Thank you so much, Bev. And you and I have had conversations about this. I strongly believe that we need to have our mining in Alaska. We're actually very fortunate to have mines all over the state. Red Dog Mine is a very good example, and it's not threatening any other natural resource right nearby. And so we need to appreciate that we have that in Alaska. We also need to listen to the locals. So on Pebble, I've already weighed in. Pebble doesn't have the technology right now to really outweigh the risks of putting our incredible jewel of a fishing resource, which brings us billions of dollars, over 40,000 jobs. I don't support that. On Donlin, I think we have yet to hear more. My understanding is that there may be some ways we can change it up so that we are not affecting that salmon run as much. And so I have yet to hear more about that, and I will be listening to the people who are in that region first as we make those decisions.
All right,
thank you so much, Bev.
Well, let's say one thing. The Donlin mine is on Calista land, and Calista is supported for it and worked for it and wants it, and I listen to Calista and I listen to the tribes. The mine can be developed. I happen to know that area very well. Secondly, on the Pebble, I've said this time and time again, it is state land. And someone that says we're not going to develop state land, when we put it up for discovery, exploration, and development, the state should control it, not the federal government. If we allow the federal government to move in, and every time the state decides to use a piece of land by outside influence, by other people interested in it, then we lose our state's rights. Now, if they decide on the federal level that it can't be done, then they ought to pay the people of the state of Alaska, or give us equal value in land size. But anytime you start allowing the federal government to take the land away from the state, then Alaskans lose. So I tell everybody to think about that. I don't want to lose the value of that land. If they have to pay us, they should.
Let's follow up a little bit there, Representative Young. If the federal government, you've said the federal government should compensate states if the EPA doesn't allow permitting of the Pebble mine, saying, as you just did, that it should be a state decision. So what would that look like? The federal government, are you saying that the federal government should pay states when they want to develop a project and federal agencies say they can't?
If you believe in this state, you do not allow the federal government to take the land away from the state. Then you become a territory.
What about the EPA?
Now, the EPA itself, no one said it can't be done. If they do say it's got to be done, they should pay it for it. I keep saying that. People don't. Why would you allow somebody to take your land away without compensation? When we were given 103 million acres of land by the federal government and the Congress for our social economic well-being. That's what it's all about. Because they may decide, an interest group may decide, you may not be able to build a school on state land. You are losing states' rights.
So does the federal government have no oversight here?
They could have oversight. The state has oversight. The state has a DEC. State can let the state make the decisions. If the states decide not to do it, fine. If the states decide to do it, then the federal government has to prove why they can't do it.
All right,
Ms. Galvin, on the Pebble mine issue, you stated you're against the Pebble mine, right? What about this issue of federal control of Alaska's state lands? You've heard what the congressman had to say. Does the Clean Water Act give the federal government too much power over what we do here in Alaska? And what's your solution to this?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. And again, this is a time to go back and talk to our constituents. It's critical that we're balancing the needs, certainly of economic development in Bristol Bay. They're hungry for jobs, and we need to work on that. We understand that there is permitting processes that are federal and are state. That's just the way it is right now. They're federal and they're state. And I don't think that we should jump in and get in the way of it, but we also should be listening to our constituents. And if I'm asked about where I am on that position, I'll tell you. As that's what's important, is that I'm listening and I go back and I go to Washington and I say, here's where our people are. And we need to be focused on that.
Listening is one thing, though, but when it comes down to action, what's your position? Does the federal government have too much reach into what Alaska does?
I think on some of the projects, and there have been many, there's roads, there's rail, there's lots of discussion about whether or not we allow projects to happen on our lands. And I'll tell you, natural resource development depends on two things. One is the cost of moving goods, and it goes up if there's not access to them. right? We need to make sure that we're helping with that. The second is the cost of transport of our energy to move things. And so there is going to be a balance where we need to not let the federal government take over. Certainly in the Southeast, we saw that happen years ago, and that just shut down the economy there. We cannot allow the federal government to come in single-handedly and make those decisions. We do have to fight. And that would be my role, after listening to the locals, to know what they would want me to fight for.
Best dancing job I've ever seen.
Would you like to follow up, sir?
Well, again, you know how I feel about states' rights. States' rights, to me, is my holy grail and always has been. We actually, if we don't do it, they hurt us when they had the Alaska National Lands Act. That's the Congress was under her leadership. Took away the land, 27 million acres of land which we chose. And when you allow the federal government to impose their will on a state, you lose your statehood. You become a territory again. And we fought to become a state. So I urge people to understand that. If we don't, let's become a territory then. I argue, let's be a state, really be a state.
Ms. Galvin.
Well, I think it's important to understand that while we're a state, we do want the assistance of the federal government. I was just talking to someone in the Interior recently about this in Copper River, and they were saying, we want to have control of our lands, without a doubt. This is Atna. But we also need the assistance of the federal government to make sure that we're keeping others out. And so I think there is a place for us to make sure that we get the federal assistance as the state dictates it. As the people, and particularly if it's a sovereign government, we need to treat them as partners.
All right, let's move on. We want to hear from Alaskans tonight as well. Our Taylor Perez is monitoring some of the questions that we're seeing on social media from our viewers all across the state of Alaska. And Taylor, what are they asking about tonight?
That's right, Mike. We are monitoring our Facebook Live, our Facebook and our Twitter feed, and you can join in on the conversation too. Just use the hashtag debate for the state. So this question comes off of Facebook from Kat Coward. She wants to know from both of the candidates here, oil prices are low and tapering. What other areas of the economy can Alaska develop to replace the oil economy? Let's go to Representative Young.
Well, this is the biggest issue. I've been working this a long time, and we became too dependent on oil, and we have no control over the price. And I've argued that when we had the money, we didn't spend it as we should have, and that's developing other resources. We're a resource-oriented state, and the best resources we haven't really developed to the extent we can, is hydropower, geothermal power, yes, wind and solar power to some degree. But those two, with hydro and geothermal, not the gas, I'd like to sell the gas, but those two we could take and develop a resource-based economy by taking our resources and adding value to it and shipping it out instead of shipping it out in the raw. I keep reminding people, we have set aside and we have not had an energy policy. Energy is the key to free society. Energy is the key to employment. Energy is the key for a group of people that can provide for the state and taxes to the federal government. So I'm big in energy. I'm working hard on it. I've done well on it so far. We've got some projects we're still working on, and I'll continue to do that.
Ms. Galvin.
Thanks so much for your question, Kat. You're right. The price of oil has been very much a problem for us here in Alaska, especially recently. That said, we still have some good opportunities here. My husband is in oil and gas, and let's make sure that while it's marketable, Alaska gets as much as we can with that. At the same time, let's remember, when it comes to energy, we have a lot of opportunities, and I know Don Young has been working on it for 47 years. Maybe it's time for a fresh voice. Maybe it's time for somebody else to get in there and talk about hydro, someone else to get in there and talk about our other renewable opportunities. We have so much great research happening right now, especially when it comes to wind, solar. We've got good examples. Kodiak's an excellent one. We need to move it. We also need to move us in other areas, though. Tourism can be rebuilt differently post-pandemic, fisheries, and our gas line needs to, our natural gas needs to also get put to market. I look forward to being a part of that discussion in the room. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. We're now going to give our candidates a chance to ask their opponent a question. The format will be 20 seconds for the question, 1 minute for the answer, and a 30-second rebuttal, if there's a request to do that. Let's go first to Ms. Galvin. What's your question for Representative Young tonight?
Thank you. Don, when the CARES Act was being crafted, you couldn't bother to even vote. Instead, you were in Palmer talking about the beer virus with a whole lot of seniors and saying how you didn't want to be in D.C., quote, with that bunch of monkeys. now that we have 78 people with the coronavirus and the Yukon Cup today alone, I want to know why you didn't feel you needed to be there representing Alaskans' interest.
Well, that's a good question, because I voted so many times on the CARES Act and supporting those that have the pandemic. You can check my record on that. And what really bothers me the most is you bring that votes up twice now. I voted 30,000 times, and I have missed some votes. I'm actually 5,000 miles one way. And if you do get elected, God help us, but if you do get elected, you'll find out traveling back and forth is the hardest part about the job. Yes, I was gone. I was in Palmer. It was scheduled. That did happen. It was early on, and I do admit that. But you have to understand one thing. That was the beginning. And I've taken and done a good job doing this. I worked and I missed the first CARES vote. I voted every CARES bill after that. But again, 30,000 times. You haven't voted once. Keep that in mind. You say you're going to be there. If you're going to be there, then you're not going to be here. Keep that in mind. You have to balance it. And I've done that very well. And if you check my voting record, you say I've missed votes. It's been 95% for the last 5 years. Yes, I've missed some votes during my 47 years. I will, because I'm a long ways away, as you are.
Ms. Galvin, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Certainly, thank you so much. Well, unfortunately, Don, the facts don't speak to that. You've missed over 14% of your votes in your career.
In 48
let me finish my 30
yes.
seconds, sir. We're not like other national forums. We're respectful here. We're civil. And unfortunately, you've missed 14%. Not our senators haven't, but you have. And that's more than 4 times the average missed votes. We only have 1 rep. I'll show up. I'll work more than full time for every Alaskan as an independent voice in the majority where we get to make decisions.
Congressman Young, it is your turn. What is your question for Ms. Galvin?
What's your stand on the Second Amendment, Alyse?
My name is Alyse Galvin,
Oh, it is. I'm sorry.
and I fully support protecting the Second Amendment right. Fully. My family taught me how to hunt. Originally it was for rabbits when I was 7 years old. I also appreciate that we need to hold on to our guns for sport, for protection, and I am full in support of our Second Amendment rights.
Well, the reason why I asked that question, I have a note here from Bridget. Claire, I think that's your daughter, I believe, has sent it out on Facebook, and it says, I voted for a woman that supports gun control. And it happens to be signed by your daughter, who happens to be your publicist. And I just wondered how you can say that and send it out to a certain group of people that you are supporting the Second Amendment when she says that you do not, that you support gun control. So where's the divide there? I don't quite understand it. You can't say one thing. It's like being an independent Democrat. There's no such thing as an independent Democrat. You realize that you've got $440,000 from Nancy Pelosi's PAC. You got $14,000 from Nancy Pelosi personally. So you can't be an independent, as you can't be for the Second Amendment and send something like that out.
Representative Young. Ms. Galvin, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thanks for that chance. Since he's attacking my family.
No, I'm not attacking the family. I'm attacking your people.
I'm so tired of the lies that have been said throughout this entire campaign. I am not for the Green New Deal. I am not for Medicare for all. I am not for the destroying our Second Amendment rights. I'm really upset that this campaign has come to this. You're better than that, Don Young. Alaska's better than that. We expect more, and I'm happy to have that discussion about money. And I bet you're going to be a little ashamed of yourself.
Never.
Let's move on now. Coastal erosion is threatening numerous communities in Alaska and other parts of the nation. It's also threatening military infrastructure on the coastlines. The price tag for mitigating erosion and sea level rise is enormous. What do you think can and should be done to address this? Representative Young, you can start. 1 minute.
You know, this is probably the biggest challenge. Water is really a very strong element. It destroys a lot. And I don't know what you can do about as far as keeping the erosion from occurring. I am a big supporter of moving villages that are in that position. Kevalina, we spent about $57 million trying to use riprap. Ted Stevens and I did. It didn't work. So we're moving the village now. We're trying to get in the areas where this is occurring. You're not going to stop erosion. Look at the Grand Canyon. That's something people don't recognize. It is a strong force. So I'm actually working for each village. It has threatened us, see if we can't get FEMA money and other monies to build roads to another location to have them move out of that erosion problem, because you're not going to stop the water. We've seen it time after time after time. And I can give you an example in Fort Yukon, but I'm run out of time.
All right, thank you. Ms. Galvin, 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, let's call it what it is. It's climate crisis. And Shishmaref, Newtalk are two villages that are literally falling into the water because of erosion. We need to know more about it. We need to know what mitigations measures need to be taken. My opponent has thrown a little tiny bit of money into it. It's not enough to move the communities. We need to have a voice in Washington talking about this seriously, not talking about it as though God is going to fix it. A divine intervention isn't going to fix this problem. We need more money on research, more money on mitigation measures. The Department of Defense has said this is one of our #1 threats. It is expensive. So let's figure out the best way to attack it. And it's important that we have somebody in the room making these decisions over the next couple of years. And again, like I said, he's not showing up. He's part-time. I'll be there full-time as your independent voice in Washington, in the majority.
Another climate-related question: as sea ice retreats, more vessels are transiting the Arctic. What should the federal government do now to try to prevent an ecological disaster in that region if one of those ships should run aground? Ms. Galvin.
Thank you. Well, it's true that now the waters are open. And there's a lot of opportunity here, even though we know it's also dangerous and disastrous and threatening our area. It's also opportunity. So Russia knows it. They have now 28 icebreakers. We have one, maybe 1.5, and it's right now on its way to Antarctica. We need investment in not only the icebreakers, but also our Coast Guard. I even support deepening investment in our ferry system. And of course, the ports all the way up and down the coastline. We have the longest coastline in the United States, facing Russia, facing China, facing North Korea. And we need to make sure that we have a strong voice working with the senators in the Senate to get the important investment of infrastructure and in our military. Lately, we've had a huge amount of threats by the Russian aircraft,
leave it there.
And we need to make sure to be there to defend it.
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. Representative Yo.
Well, I'm doing the job already, and I hear a lot of this, I'm gonna. The fact is, we're now beginning to build a Nome port. Worked hard on that. I'm trying to get one at Point Clarence. I think we're in real progress there. We are looking at another one at Blossom Point in Kotzebue. We need these ports. We're working very hard to get it done, making progress all the time. Icebreakers has always been a problem. I was there when we funded the first 3 icebreakers. They were out. And I, right up front with you, they weren't maintained correctly. We're looking, we got money, the senators and myself, Dan Sullivan especially, got money into the building a brand new icebreaker, but it's still going to be 4 or 5 years. And we don't know sure whether it's going to be stationed in Antarctica. We're trying to get it stationed in the Arctic. And then the last thing, we need to have more. My opponent is right, with maybe 19 over there, and Russia. China's got more. And they know that Northwest Passage is crucially important. We need to be prepared. The military recognize it, and I'm making progress.
All right, thank you both. We're going to take a quick break, so please stay with us as Debate for the State continues.
Okay, Alaska, the deadline to register to vote has passed. But if you're over 18 and you get a PFD, chances are you are registered to vote in Alaska. These are the top 3 ways you can vote on or before November 3rd. Number 1, early voting. Most early voting locations are open Monday through Friday during business hours, so you can look up where to vote at the link below and go in and vote. Number 2, absentee voting. October 24th is the last day you can request your absentee ballot. That's the ballot you get if you want to vote from home or wherever you are in the world. If you want to vote this way, you have to either apply online with an Alaska driver's license or state ID, or you can also use your passport or birth certificate to apply by mail. Make sure to fill out your ballot and get it mailed out by November 3rd. You can also drop off your absentee ballot at any Division of Elections office, voting location, or ballot drop box location. And hey, if you decide you want to vote early or in person instead, you're allowed to do that. Just destroy and dispose of your absentee ballot. And finally, the third way to vote this year is on Election Day, Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Find out your voting location by going to myvoterinformation.alaska.gov. You don't have to have a driver's license to vote. Other identification like your voter ID, tribal ID, state ID, military ID, passport, hunting or fishing license, or other current or valid photo ID can work too. If you have none of those, a current utility bill, paycheck, government check, bank statement, or other government-issued document with your name and current address can work. If you need language assistance, you can bring a person of your choice into the voting booth to help. Bilingual poll workers and on-call interpreters will also be available on Election Day. Find out more by checking out our election coverage page at alaskapublic.org/news/elections-2020.
Welcome back to Debate for the State for U.S. House. I'm Lori Townsend here with Mike Ross from Alaska's News Source. We're going to turn our attention to rural Alaska now. The poverty rate in rural Alaska is much higher than in our cities. What should Congress do to bring new economic opportunities to rural communities to create jobs? Representative Young, you have 1 minute.
Well, I'm happy you asked that question. I've been very actively involved in the rural areas of Alaska. We have a challenge of having to have power. You can't raise your economy if you don't have cheap power, and most of the villages do not. We've changed the way people live. They used to be trappers when I first came up there. Now mostly it's government work or, very frankly, welfare. We have to change that, and power will give them the opportunity to do that, and I'm working very hard. In fact, I passed 2 bills. I had 2 bills signed today. Remember, I don't have any clout, but I had 2 bills signed into law today by the President, as busy as he is. Progress for the Indian and Native business tribes, the Incubator Act as far as getting more deals. I'm trying to get businesses, if we have cheap power, we can do that. And that's up to a lot of the leaders. I know I've talked to the regional corporations, I've talked to the villages, and they tell me we need jobs that really create wealth, and that means the development of our resources on native lands. That's like the Donlin Mine. We have to do that. We'll do it. We'll do it with your help, and I've been doing it.
Thank you, Representative Young. Ms. Galvin, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I think that we need a new approach. Our current representative has been in for 47 years, and he's done some things. And now it's time for some new things. New things like, first of all, broadband internet, high speed in the homes. Needs to be there. It's going to open opportunities for telehealth, online learning, and most importantly, economic opportunities for all. We can have our local elders even staying and able to stay in their communities if we pay attention. We need to have locally resourced energy, and that is going to bring us jobs. We've got wonderful opportunities of sustainable economies already happening in many of our communities. 8A is an important one because it gives a jump start necessary. That's an important federal opportunity. I was speaking with Rep. Velasquez just yesterday morning, who is in charge of small business development, and she said 8A is going to be key as we climb out of this coronavirus. Really, it's a unique financial crisis that is going to need those investments.
Another issue important to rural Alaska, dozens of rural Alaska communities still have no running water. And the COVID-19 pandemic has brought new attention to this public health concern. The community of Stebbins, for example, is trying to contain a growing outbreak without basic sanitation. What is your solution to this problem? Alyse Galvin.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'll take it seriously. You will never hear me say words like beer virus. It's critical that we recognize that we have more than 40 communities without water and sewer. And we're talking about basic necessities of hand washing for 20 seconds, wearing a mask, and social distancing. They also have housing issues there, where we have multiple families living in one unit. We need to look at what is happening in rural Alaska, which is really bringing a light to the many inconsistencies in our federal investment in Alaska for a long time. We're a new state, and we need to help those in Washington appreciate that we've had a disproportionate amount of investment in this state, particularly in these very, very basic services.
Representative Young.
Well, first let me say I'd like to hear my opponent say 8A. That's my bill. That's the one that created the opportunities for the Alaskan corporations and the villages. I'm now being endorsed by 6 of the regional corporations and the Alaska Village Corporation, so they know I've done the job. I am from the bush. I did live, in fact, I still do, when I'm back in Fort Yukon, which is every summer, but this summer, I don't have running water. I don't have a shower. I don't have an inside toilet. I do it the old-fashioned way, and it is very difficult. It takes a lot of work. I am clean, though, and so is my family. I raised my daughters, or my wife raised them. So the idea of not having water and sewer we have to work on. And if you look at where I started, now I have all but 47 villages have running water and sewerage. You work the rest of the villages I believe there's about 300, they've got running water and sewer, and I did that. I've done the job, I'm going to continue to do the job, and a Johnny come lately can't do it. Excuse me, a Sally come lately can't do it.
All right, thank you, Representative Gill.
Yeah,
Ms. Galvin, did you care to address
30
that?
seconds.
Yeah, I would like to respond to that.
Yes.
I'm going to be there full time. My current opponent, who's just mentioned Fort Yukon, I think he goes there once a year, didn't come this year for a couple of weeks. The rest of this time, he doesn't come home like we see our senators doing. He goes to his mansion in Arizona or Virginia or Montana. I don't know where he is, but he's not here in the same way. And that's why I think Alaska's so ready for a new voice, someone who represents really all Alaskans, all Republicans, all Independents, all Democrats. That's what I'll be doing. Thank you.
And we'll give you a chance to rebut.
Well, you know, again, you listen to someone that dances and doesn't answer the questions. I have had 3 million miles coming back to the state of Alaska. I'm back here twice a month, most of the time, at least. I know once a month for sure. And yes, it's still 11,000 miles round trip. She really doesn't know what she's talking about. She's getting into something she doesn't understand. This is a long ways away. We work to get back. You check everybody. No one's really complaining about that other than her.
Thank you. Thousands of Alaskans have already voted by mail, and many more plan to. Do you accept that as a valid form of voting, even if it takes weeks in some states to finish counting the mailed ballots? Representative Young, you have 1 minute.
First, we don't have mailed ballots in Alaska. We have what's called absentee ballots, and they're mailed in. But we don't have mailed ballots like they did back east, where they mail 2 apartment houses and one person can vote 25 times. So I'm not really worried about that in Alaska.
Do you think that happens?
Oh, I don't know. That's what they say has happened, but I'm going to say it because they collected them at the apartment post office, and one person did all the voting. And that was actually done. New Jersey did it. I'm saying we don't have that problem in Alaska. I'm proud of the way Alaska runs their elections. I take the results of the election. Absentees are very important. I voted absentee because I can't be in Fort Yukon, very frankly, because they had a quarantine. And so keep in mind the idea of fear of voting by absentee is wrong. I believe it's the correct way to do it. We've done it for years, and we'll continue to do it. And the votes will be counted. We'll see what happens. When I go back to Washington, D.C., I'm be very glad that they can count the national votes, too, because what happens in the House.
Ms. Galvin, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I think we need to make voting accessible, easy. We need more people to vote. We're so blessed to live in a country where we can vote. And I encourage everyone to get off the couch and make sure that they get in there and vote. Absentee balloting has happened here for a long, long time, and we've done it well in Alaska. Research has shown that the nation is also doing it quite well. So I don't have any doubts that we're going to be able to have a very solid election. I also want to appreciate that every village also needs to be voting here in Alaska. I know there's been some hang-ups here, particularly in the primary, that are very unfortunate. We need to really pay attention and make sure that every Alaskan 18 or older takes advantage of their power to own government, because they need to own a slice of it. Democracy is not a spectator sport.
Thank you. We're gathering questions from Alaskans across the state, from our elders, our youth to our elders. Our next question comes from a student with Anchorage Youth Vote.
Hello, my name is Tuan Graziano. I'm a member of Anchorage Youth Vote, and I'm also a student at UAA. My question is, Gen Z and millennials outnumber all other living generations combined, yet feel the most disenfranchised. What value do you place on youth voice and the youth vote, and what do you think can be done to empower young people to become more civically engaged?
All right, thank you for that question. And Ms. Galvin, we'll start with you. What can be done to empower the youth vote?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tuan. I appreciate the question. You are so very important. You're the seed corn for our economy. You're the seed corn for our future, for our welfare of our state, for our whole nation. And we need to pay attention, and unfortunately, you've not been very excited about the most recent representation. It hasn't connected to you, and I apologize for that. It's part of why I'm running. I want to make sure that the next generation can see the connectivity between their lives right now and the policy that's happening over there in Washington, D.C. or in Juneau. It's critical that we spend more time engaging with you. I will be using all of the social media platforms so that you're connected to the decisions made, whether it's about broadband internet, whether it's about how to get you into the great jobs ahead, making sure that our economy of the future is really reflecting the 21st century. With my new voice in the majority, I will be able to send an independent from here in Alaska reflecting what you value.
All right,
I'll be
you.
listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Well, first,
Young,
let
1
me
minute.
address the fact that you have a bigger responsibility in your age group, especially. I do believe civics, I believe politics should be taught in the classroom, in the class. I think there'd be exposure. In fact, if I was teaching again, which I would have actually an election in my classroom and pick a candidate, be it Joe Biden, Sleepy, and be it Donald Trump, and have a mock election. And this is the fact we have. You're not the only ones that are actually not paying attention. I think our average voting percentage is 47%. So you have to organize what you're doing. As you say, you're interested in it. Go out and organize the groups. Go to the schools. Go to the school board and say, okay, let's take and teach civics. Let's teach politics in the classroom. Get you interested in it when they're in school. Then they'll be interested when they get out of school and get into their occupation. And it's very, very important. I happen to agree that voting is so low in this state. I was reading some of the results recently. 13% in one place on a city election. That's not good.
Thank you, Representative Young. It's time again for our two candidates to ask each other a question. The question must be 20 seconds or less, and the responding candidate will get 1 minute for an answer. And in this round, Representative Young, you go first.
Well, Alyse, I was surprised you said I was lying about my ads. They're not my ads, they're ads for my campaign. They're all the truth. And I tell anybody to check them out. So why do you say that? It really bothers me because I can show you ads where you're thinking about me or you're outright lies. And that's something I don't understand, how you can say that when you're lying yourself.
Ms. Galvin.
Don, I have not at all ever lied in any of my ads.
Oh,
I will say that your most recent ad talked about me saying that I am supportive of taxing Alaskans $2,800. Are you kidding me? The last thing we need to do is raise taxes on working families. Number two, I support Medicare for all, you said in the ad. Your actress did, rather. I do not. I do not support Medicare for all or the Green New Deal. I never have said such a thing. And yet there you are putting out these kind of fear-mongering ads that, to me, just don't reflect the civility that Alaskans are looking for. They're looking for reasonable voices talking about the issues right here in Alaska that we are right now facing. Everything from jobs, health care, certainly in this pandemic, and creating a system educationally where our Alaskans are getting the good jobs. That's what we're thinking about.
Again, Alyse, you've been telling story tales right here on television. You ran ads against me about no clout. I passed 2 bills today signed by President. You haven't done any. The highway monies in this, every year it increases because of my actions, and yet you put those in. And you cannot say that you're against those things that you were talking about when you take $440,000 from Nancy Pelosi's because she supports that, or the $14,000 she contributed to you. You're hooked with that group, whether you admit it or not. They do not like Alaska.
Ms. Galvin, it's time for your question. 20 seconds for the question, please.
All right, well, I'm going to just go right into what you just were talking about then. Let's talk about money in politics. Don, more than 2/3 of your money comes from PACs. Also, unfortunately, about half of your money comes from individuals from the lower 48, not from Alaskans. I have the most Alaskans ever in the history of any race who have put in money here. How can you possibly feel as though you're representing all of our constituents and our needs when you're in corporate pockets?
Well, again, Alyse, you don't know what you're talking about because, yes, I receive money from PACs. I receive money from the labor unions, have a PAC. I receive money from the maritime unions, they have a PAC. I receive money from all different groups that believe I will support what they wish to have because I believe in it. And I do not get money from Nancy Pelosi or Shifty Shift or I can go down the line. Everybody that you get money from is against Alaska. They want to make Alaska a park. So you are part of that group. You cannot deny it. When you take their money, you say you're an independent. You are not an independent. You're beholden to them. You will be beholden to them when you vote. Your voice will not be heard. They'll actually run over you like a freight train because I watched them. That group does not like Alaska as far as resources. They want to make a park out of it for their use only. They want to destroy Alaskan jobs. They want it a socialized state as they're going to try to do in the lower 48. You are part of that group whether you like it or not.
Ms. Galvin, would you like to respond?
Yeah, Don Young, you've received over $300,000 from the healthcare industry. No wonder Alaska has the highest healthcare costs in the entire world per capita. You're not fighting for Alaskans. Now, you're talking about 1/10 of 1% of my campaign money. That's what you're talking about. 1/10 of 1% of my campaign money. All of my money is, 93% is from individuals and the most Alaskans ever. And you know what? I'm proud of that because the Republicans, Independents, and Democrats who are so ready for change.
Okay.
All right, let's go one more round. Representative Young.
Not a question. I just want to come. She said I received that money from Pharma. I have received
Healthcare industry.
$1,000 from them, period, and that was 10 years ago.
Healthcare industry.
That was the healthcare, and I've not received it from the healthcare industry. And then again, as I say before, it's hard for me to say because she accused me of lying. She's the biggest one in this room right now. I've got the records. I got my federal deal. I know exactly what I've done. And I have her say that.
All right, let's move on. Another topic, let's turn now to the national debate over equity and policing policy. The death of George Floyd in Minneapolis sparked protests in communities all across our country demanding police reform. In the months since, Congress has not passed police reform legislation. Now, do you think Congress should act on this issue? And if so, what should that legislation be? Congressman Young.
We had a bill on the Senate side, was promoted by the Republican Party by Tim Scott, who's African-American, great man. And if we adopted that bill, it was turned down, very frankly, by the liberal socialist Democrats. We do recognize there has to be a better standard for police work. The policemen do support me. We have to have strong police, and I will not vote to defund it. Now, I know the party that Alyse belongs to wants to defund the police all across the nation, congressionally. And I'm saying, no way, it's not going to happen. We want to make sure our policemen have the proper training, the proper equipment, can keep peace. And it hasn't happened recently. We have these riots going on right now. If you look who's rioting, what's occurring, the police can't act because they may be responsible. I'm suggesting respectfully, we have to, as a state and as a nation, say, back our police up. We need it. If we don't, we'll have anarchy.
Ms. Galvin.
I support more resources for the police. We need more. We don't need to defund police. I think that in Alaska especially, we are missing any public safety officer in more than 70 communities. We have some work to be done that hasn't happened. Although, you know, my current representative has been in for 47 years. We're ready for change. We have issues like murdered and missing Indigenous women that needs more resources put to it. We need to make sure that when our families are picking up the phone, that they're going to have somebody come soon, not hours, days, or weeks. This is not acceptable. We need to do better. I don't support the looting and rioting that's happening. Absolutely not. Those people need to be held accountable. At the same time, I know in our Constitution we do have the right to peacefully protest. But let's find some balance here, and let's make sure that we have a representative. I've been an independent like 58% of Alaskans for more than 14 years. I look forward to representing all of Alaska.
All right, thank you. All right, Alaskans are watching and listening to this debate tonight, and they have their own questions. Let's go back to Taylor Perez, who's monitoring our viewers' questions on social media. Taylor?
That's right, Mike. We have some great engagement tonight on our social media platforms, and we want to thank our viewers for engaging with these candidates. This question actually comes from Tammy on Twitter, turning now to healthcare. She would like both the candidates to answer, how will you support the fight for more drug and alcohol addiction programs and, in turn, support mental health programs? We'll go first to Ms. Galvin.
Thank you so much for that question, Tammy. I'm going to tell you that this is personal for me. Yes, our healthcare system in Alaska is broken. We've got to fix it. I got a call this morning that my brother-in-law passed away due to alcoholism. We have some work to do in Alaska. You know the numbers, I know the numbers. We have too many of our people ready for help, and we don't have beds available, not beds locally available even. So we're splitting up families when they're ready for help. We need more providers up here. I'd like to have a pipeline of providers so that we, in our education system, we're meeting our workforce needs. It's critical that we pay attention to this. Alaska we do have the highest suicide rate from 15-year-olds to 24. We just got an article released on that 2 days ago. We have some work to do, Tammy, and I can't wait to speak about this proudly in a way that makes us know we are doing some things right, but we have a lot of work yet to do for Alaska.
Leave it there.
Thank you.
Representative Young.
Well, let's consider one thing, that this is a problem. It's a state problem, too. And, you know, I listened to my opponent. I think maybe she ought to run for state legislative body. Maybe she can solve some of these problems. When I was in the state legislature, I passed the first Rehabilitation Act for alcoholism. We do have that challenge. We are a heavy drinking state. I'd like to get into the classroom sooner. They know the problems. I'd like to make sure that they, you know, we have another problem. We have opioids in the state. We're having a problem of prosecution because some people don't want to prosecute. I believe the dealers ought to be prosecuted to the extent. The user, not so much. I believe they do have an addiction. So we have to work on it, and I don't know what the federal government can do other than send money. We are sending a lot of money. I worked to get the new unit here for abused women and missing women, Alaska Native women. We had a big celebration out on the base, and we've been working on this for a while, and we have to continue to do it. It's a very serious problem, and I know what the problem is, and we're working on it. But the state has to step up too.
All right, thank you, Representative Young. There's a lot of divide across our nation. We might have heard a little bit of it here tonight. How would you two work to heal an increasingly divided nation? And we'll go to Representative Young first.
Well, one of the things, it's difficult to take as long as you got media. Media likes hysteria type reporting. I think an exposure real quickly, it makes a group of human beings very divisive because they interpret different things that they see. I don't know the total answer. I believe, very frankly, we ought to be more involved in the church. I believe that'll help us out. I think actually the ministry has not done their job as they should, but it's a very difficult job. I personally, don't have any animosity for anybody, but I would like to appreciate if they'd say some good things about me and how bad I am. That sort of bothers me. I have to admit that.
We'll have to leave it there, sir. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Galvin.
Yes, I think that the divisive politics is driving away Americans from being interested in our government, and that's a problem. I think that's why most Alaskans, almost 68%, 58%, are independent, nonpartisan. They're tired of the hyper-partisanship that's going on right now. Constant shouting that it's really creating a logjam to getting things done. In the House, there is something called the Problem Solvers Caucus. I look forward to serving there, where they take a D and an R at the same time. I'll go in on my own and work towards solutions together.
Okay, we
to
have to
me,
leave
that's
it there.
what we're looking
Thank you.
for.
All right, now it is time for our lightning round. Most of these are yes or no questions. Please answer only yes or no. For other questions, you will have 20 seconds to respond.
Yes or no? How do you plan to vote on ballot measure 1, which would boost oil taxes in Alaska? Ms. Galvin.
No.
Yes or no? Thank you. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to move on.
No.
Okay.
Yes or no? How do you plan to vote on ballot measure 2, which would open Alaska's primary elections, implement ranked choice voting in Alaska, and require more campaign finance disclosure? Representative
No.
Young. Ms. Galvin.
Yes.
Should the federal government increase regulation of greenhouse gas emissions? And you have about 20 seconds each. Representative Young.
I don't think the federal government should be doing all this. It's part of the state and the private industry. We end up having regulations. We are having the cleanest air and cleanest water we've had in centuries. And I think we've done a good job. But we also have India, we have China, we have the other countries that are polluting, including Russia and Europe. So we're doing a good job.
Ms. Galvin.
We already have regs on greenhouse gas emissions. I think we need to make sure we're following them and that we have incentives to follow them. It's really important that we do that.
All right, it's time now for closing statements from the candidates. We again flipped a coin, and I can't remember who's supposed to go first.
Let's see.
It's Representative Young.
Was that the way it went?
You're supposed to go, sir.
Don't recall. That's correct.
Yes.
I want to thank you, the listening audience, and again, as I mentioned, thanking KAKM Channel 2. This has been an interesting discussion. I think you realize that you saw what we've been able to do and talk about. I can do the job. I've done the job. I'm excited about the job. And you know, when do you start to have age discrimination? I'm pretty proud of what I can do right now, and I'm pretty proud of what I can do in Congress. Like I just mentioned, they just interviewed me by Virginia and Vanderbilt to be the most effective congressman in Congress again. That means I have the clout, it means I have the know-how, it means I can do the job for Alaskans as I've done. And one of the biggest things you have to understand is I listen to you, I do what you asked me to do. This year I introduced 52 bills. I've got 6 out of committee and I got 1 signed into law. AOC has none. All the freshmen have none. Freshmen can't do anything, and I could do it all for you if you ask me to do it. So I'm asking you respectfully, remember Don Young, the congressman for all of Alaska, and vote for me on November the 3rd. If you do so, I will thank you immensely. God bless.
Ms. Galvin, 1 minute for your closing statement, please.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight. Thank you for believing in better. Thank you for allowing us to have some time to earn your trust. In terms of freshmen getting work done, I'm going to compliment my opponent tonight. He got the pipeline in his first 6 months. He passed that bill, or he was part of it. I don't know how much he was part of it, but he was part of it as a freshman. So I think a lot can be accomplished as a freshman. In terms of being the most effective member in Congress, the award that he received was from when he was in the majority a couple years back. That was for that time period. And he forgets to mention that detail, unfortunately. So what I'll say to you all is that while there's been a lot of work done in the last 47 years, it's time for change. And what's most important is that we're at a crossroads. You have a choice. Do you want to have somebody in the room as an independent voice standing strongly up for Alaskans? Or do you want to have somebody who's in the hallway shouting that you're all socialists?
We've got to leave it there.
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. That concludes our debate for the state for 2020 for tonight, but stay on Facebook Live for a post-debate analysis program hosted by Rebecca Palsha and Liz Ruskin. We'd like to thank our candidates for joining us. Congressman Don Young and Alyse Galvin, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to our Taylor Perez for monitoring our social media traffic tonight.
Election Day is November 3rd, and we encourage every Alaskan to get out and vote and make your voices heard. Join us again tomorrow evening for the second debate in our series, the U.S. Senate debate, with incumbent candidate Republican Dan Sullivan and Democratic nominee Independent Al Gross will join us at 7 p.m. tomorrow. We hope you will as well. For Alaska's news source and Alaska Public Media, thank you for joining us. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
A lot is at stake as Alaskans prepare to cast their votes this election season. Alaska Public Media presents Debate for the State, a 2-night debate series featuring candidates for U.S. Senate and House. Join moderators Lori Townsend and KTUU's Mike Ross as they ask the
Really what was important was to look at what each candidate had to accomplish coming in. 2 things. Galvin is only leading female voters by about 4 points, so she really needed to create some space with her answers, and I believe she really needed to address that segment of the voters. The other segment of the voting that was really key that she addressed was those voters living outside of Anchorage. Currently, she's down about 13 points outside of Anchorage. And so the opportunity to talk to those folks in rural areas or in the Mat-Su Borough or in Southeast was really critical for her tonight. And to be honest with you, I just didn't see where she really took advantage of that and made that connection. You have an election that's already underway and people are already voting, so this in a sense is their closing arguments. And I felt her closing arguments for those key demographics that she needed to either widen the space of the gap between her and Representative Young, I can't see where she really made headway into closing those gaps.
You, Andrew, you didn't feel that she made headway with women? You don't think that she connected with women?
I don't. I think there were a couple of her answers, especially with regards to the pandemic. I thought she spent most of the debate kind of defending her records, defending her own ads. There was a great opportunity to reach out and not just connect with female voters who I believe she's underperforming with, but really everybody. I mean, talking about the effects of the pandemic and the fact how families have kids at home now and schools aren't reopened, and tying it back into Representative Young's real failure on the congressional level to really be a leader in trying to reach some kind of bipartisan solution on the next stimulus package. I think she could have related more personal experiences. I thought much too much of the debate was on the back chat. And when you're debating Don Young, you're basically debating the bully in the schoolyard. And so you almost have to almost show up and kind of be in the same room, but have your own agenda talking directly to voters. And I thought tonight she got a little bit too caught up in the back and forth.
Les, what do you think?
I guess I'm not going to say how well she resonated with women voters because I don't know. I'll find out when I get home and talk to Kelly. But, Don Young was Don Young. It was his closing statement when he said, "I want people to say nice things about me." And that was flabbergasting. For a man who dropped the F-bomb in front of school kids, for a man who outed a gay student at a school, for a man who has spent his career berating people, starting his whole thing by saying, "I like listening to people," but he doesn't listen. Pebble is the perfect example. 70% of Alaskans oppose the Pebble mine, and to this day, after 10 years of debate on the Pebble mine, and 10 years of hearing from Alaskans that they want to protect the world's greatest salmon fishery, Don Young still supports the Pebble mine. He says he wants to shift it over to the state to decide, but Governor Dunleavy supports the Pebble mine, so you shift it over to another guy who supports the Pebble mine. He doesn't listen, and I found it flabbergasting that he said he wanted people to say nice things about him when that's part of his job, and he's never done it for 48 years.
I think, Ryan, we want to bring you into this debate as well. What was your takeaway?
I think that I kind of agree with Andrew on the fact that Alyse needed to, she knows the demographic that she needs to hit, and I don't think that she did that tonight. I think she did try to go toe-to-toe with the congressman, but more arguing a little bit. And I think the accusation that he was attacking her family when he simply was just asking, he said, "This is what your daughter wrote in regards to gun control." And he wanted to know, okay, you're saying one thing, you're saying you don't support gun control, but on this part coming from a family member, she says you do. That question he asked was, what is your stance? And she never even answered that question. She just jumped right in and said, "I'm sick and tired of people attacking, you're attacking my family, I'm tired of this negative campaigning," when he wasn't attacking her. He was asking a question and saying, this is, we're hearing two different things. She could have used that as a chance to clarify, but she didn't. Instead, she just kind of dodged the question. She did that as well when asking if the federal government might have too much power. She, again, kind of sidestepped that, didn't really answer it, and I think they even tried to get her to have another run, see if she would answer it again, and she wouldn't. And I think for her, she mentioned many times that she's the independent candidate, but I don't really see the independent side of her. I see a side that aligns, obviously, with a lot of the ideals of the left, and I feel like if she's going to claim to be an independent, she needs to really focus on that and show how she is really bipartisan. What are some things that she does or has done in the past that's received bipartisan support? And I don't think that she did that here.
Liz and I were talking about this during the debate, was kind of this contention that the two of them seem to have between each other. We're going to show the video in case people missed it, the conversation about her daughter and also the congressman calling Alyse by the wrong name.
What's your stand on the Second Amendment, Alyse?
My name is Alyse Galvin, and I fully support protecting the Second Amendment right. Fully. My family taught me how to hunt. Originally it was for rabbits when I was 7 years old. I also appreciate that we need to hold on to our guns for sport, for protection, and I am full in support of our Second Amendment rights.
Well, the reason why I asked that question, I have a note here from Bridget. Claire, I think that's your daughter, I believe, has sent it out on Facebook, and it says, I voted for a woman that supports gun control. And it happens to be signed by your daughter, who happens to be your publicist. And I just wondered how you can say that and send it out to a certain group of people that you are supporting the Second Amendment when and she says that you do not, that you support gun control. So where's the divide there? I don't quite understand it. You can't say one thing. It's like being an independent Democrat. There's no such thing as an independent Democrat. You realize that you've got $440,000 from Nancy Pelosi's PAC. You got $14,000 from Nancy Pelosi personally. So you can't be an independent, as you can't be for the Second Amendment and send something like that out.
Representative Young. Ms. Galvin, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thanks for that chance. Since he's attacking my family.
No, I'm not attacking the family. I'm attacking your
I'm
people.
so tired of the lies that have been said throughout this entire campaign. I am not for the Green New Deal. I am not for Medicare for all. I am not for the destroying our Second Amendment rights. I'm really upset that this campaign has come to this. You're better than that, Don Young. Alaska's better than that.
Yeah, so that was quite a testy exchange. And of course, this is a round two for these two. 2 years ago, they also, you know, it was a contentious race then also. But the thing about him getting her name wrong, whether he did it on purpose or not, I think that is something that women could relate to. The sort of, I mean, we saw this with Kamala Harris and people mispronouncing her name in a way that appears to a lot of people to be intentionally belittling them, not recognizing who you are and saying their name. And there were a couple of other things that he did that I thought would not play well with women voters. He said at one point, towards the end, he said, she's getting into things that she just does not understand. The kind of, oh, young lady, you just don't understand this. I thought that was, you know, something that is an iffy thing to do if you're trying to appeal to women voters.
I guess he wants less, you know, you talked about, you know, you're not a woman, but your wife. How do you think your wife would take that?
You know, I think the word is that he mansplained to her, right? And you should not do that. Certainly a common campaign tactic is to try and get under the other person's skin. Everybody tries to do it, or a lot of people try and do it. I think that was his aim at trying to get under her skin. But she was right to say that he's misled people about her. I think many campaigns mislead, right? But in his ads, he says she wants to take away people's guns. She does not. She grew up with guns. He said she supports the Green New Deal. She does not, and he knows that. She said she supports Medicare for all. She does not, and he knows that. And that's the problem in campaigns. You get to say stuff that's not true, and then see if people have the money to respond. So I think that's what she was saying is, you've misled people about my record. She is a pretty moderate person. I've known her for a long time. She came down to the legislature to advocate for schools for a long time and did a very good job and worked across the aisle to do that. I never knew her politics. Yeah, I mean, they are what they are. They're sort of middle of the road.
Andrew, you've been a part of a lot of pretty contentious debates and campaigns yourself. Did you find that was an attack on her, or did you think that was just kind of how politics are?
Or on her daughter? Do you think he was attacking her daughter?
Yes, I mean, you know, the problem with Don Young is you just never know. I mean, you really don't. And I think, you know, Don Young for 24 election cycles now has been Don Young. He is a bully. And one of the things that surprises me is when I look at the most recent polling data, and I mentioned I felt she's underperforming women, she's only winning women by 4 points. I mean, if you take that same segment and ask them how they feel about President Trump, there's about a 7 or 8 point difference that she's not capturing. So when you see these debates and you see Don Young be completely inappropriate, and even to some degree, I would say misogynist, you know, that's Don Young. And what I am so amazed about is that she's not capitalizing, especially in this day and age where, you know, we have so many issues, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's equal pay, where there's so much exposure for Don Young in, you know, his policies and his work as far as, you know, when it takes in consideration equal rights or equal pay. And I'm really surprised she's underperforming with women. But even tonight, and how I would say, objectionable he was in his relationship, in his back and forth with her, even calling, Shifty Shift and, Sleepy Joe. I mean, who needs to do that? But that's Don Young, and that's how he operates.
Online women are saying that they feel like Don Young did this on purpose and that it was misogynistic. Ryan, what is your take? And as Andrew talks about saying, that's Don Young, that's kind of a thing that we've always heard from Alaskans. Do you think times have changed and that people are not as accepting to stuff like that?
I think he spent a lot of time defending his positions. He was accused of not being there, not passing anything. She basically called him, he's done, he's been there forever, he's old, he's no longer effective, and I don't think that's true. We just recently had the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was a big step, and then of course opening ANWR, which we've been trying to do for years, even under a Republican president with control of the Republican Senate and a Republican House, we weren't able to do that. But along with Don Young's leadership, working with President Trump, we were able to get that done, and ANWR is now on the road to actually being something that we can see here in the state. But I think he did spend time really talking about what he has done, what he's accomplished for Alaska. I think she was a little bit defensive. I'm not entirely sure why she was trying to be a little bit more, I don't want to say dramatic, but the attack, I don't think that was an attack on her child. He asked the question. He said, she said this. He read verbatim what she had written, and he asked. He said, this is what she's writing about you, and you say you're pro-gun. Can you explain? And instead of just explaining it, she just immediately said, well, you're attacking me. And I think that would have been a good chance to prove. She said, no, I am absolutely pro-Second Amendment, and here's why. That was a great opportunity for her to do that, and she didn't.
I do think back to the point that was raised earlier. I do think Don Young's time is running thin. The last 3 elections he's faced, the last 3 election cycles, his average vote yet has been about 51%. The prior 3 elections between 8, 10, and 12, it was around 60, 61. I think the demographics are changing in this state, especially in Anchorage. It's far more competitive. Anchorage has become far more moderate. And then when you look at the outlining areas, really his last bastions are the Mat-Su Valley and in the southeast. So I do think the tide is turning, and I do think that Don Young's act is going to be wearing thin, and it's just a matter of time. The demographics, the shift in voters, the out-migration, all of those components mean that I would probably estimate Don has another 1 or 2 terms left.
We're seeing online that some of the women that are responding online agreed that they did not connect with her, and other people that are following said that they took her emotional response about alcoholism negatively. Interesting.
I guess, Les, what would you take from that? Because some pointed out that was in a very emotional moment when she talked about her brother-in-law dying.
I've had this happen to me in the past. This sounds like it's something that just happened. This is raw for her. She's got a family member who just died, what sounds like in the last week. You can't say that family member's name without choking up. So I don't blame her for that at all. I just want to, there was one thing that is so Don Young that came out of this debate, and that was Don doesn't play well in the sandbox with others. And so we have a bill in Congress when our restaurants are suffering. In full disclosure, I'm a part owner of a restaurant. I don't know what restaurants are going to make it through this pandemic, or bars, or small businesses. But there's a bill in Congress. It had money for small restaurants. It had money for local communities. It had money for schools. You can criticize it all you want. But what Don Young said about that bill was that it had more money for other cities than it had for us. That's how legislation works. There are more people in Florida than there are in Alaska. There are more people in New York and Virginia and Texas than there are in Alaska. That's why you vote against something that could have helped our restaurants and our small businesses and our schools deal with trying to open. That was his answer, that it was too much money for other places. And it was part of the sort of Donald Trump thing, which if it's something that helps Democratic states, I'm not going to do it, even though it would also help Republican states. You can't run a divided country like this, and that's Don Young not being able to play well in the sandbox.
That was quite noticeable, his use of some of Donald Trump's nicknames, Sleepy Joe. He said that several times. Really wanted to get that in as though he knows that he needs to get the Trump base behind him. And also that he said New York, LA, Chicago, all those bad cities. I don't think, I mean, he's obviously been someone who's, you know, part of his persona is that he's a rural guy and not an urban guy, but I don't think I've heard him say that before in the Donald Trump sense. So we're seeing online that 68% of respondents thought that Don Young won this debate. How do you feel about that, Ryan? Do you think that's true?
I think he made his position, he stated his position a lot more clear than she did. I think she kind of tried to poke at him a little bit. She did bring up a couple things. I think the fact that he had missed some votes, I think that was something that he had to come back from. I kind of disagree with Les's stance on, it wasn't that the states were getting more money, it was that the funding, other states were requesting money that had nothing to do with COVID-related expenses. They were basically trying to bail themselves out using money that should go to small businesses and restaurants and those. And I think that's the main objection to the HEROES Act. But I think overall, yeah, he stuck to what he's done, why he's fit to be the congressman here in Alaska. And I don't think she really made a really compelling case as to why we should switch it up and choose her over him.
Ryan, what did you think of his use of nicknames and calling cities bad and that sort of thing?
It is unfortunately part of the campaigning. I think you were kind of right. He is playing to his to the Trump base, and I don't think it was anything overly. You know, it wasn't derogatory or anything. These are nicknames. These are things that have been said on the national level. Is it absolutely necessary to use? Probably not. But it is just part of the campaign.
We had one viewer, who's Shannon Dodson Woodford, that she says, though I'm not voting for her, she was too emotional and it showed people see that and it was her weakness, men see that and they will eat that up. Not good in the debate. She needed to not show that. Andrew, is that still a thing in this day and age that women and anybody really running for office can't show emotions?
I don't know how anybody runs for office today without showing some kind of emotion. I mean, you know, unfortunately it is. I mean, look, it's unfair, but of course, you know, I believe women on the campaign trail are held to a much different standard than men, and it's unfortunate because, you know, we're all trying to solve public policy challenges. You know, the challenge for Alyse is it is difficult to run it against an incumbent, let alone somebody who has already run 24 times before. So, you know, you're running against an incumbent who can spend an hour just saying, yeah, I did that. Yeah, that's because of me, and I voted for that, and I voted for this. And you're constantly put on the defense. So unless you show up with a clear, concise message that's able to cut through. So, you know, when Don Young says tonight that he's working on health care and doing this and that he voted against Obamacare, then Alyse, that's a perfect door for Alyse to talk about the importance of health care in Alaska with seasonal industries and the fact that we have the 3 highest, most expensive insurance markets in the country right here in Alaska. I mean, there was a lot of doors that were open for her to make a very clear and cogent argument. And I think there was just too much of kind of the fly swatting, you know, with you know, swatting away Don Young's comments.
Let's see, we tested one of your statements, Andrew. Do you think Don Young's time is running thin, like our panelists said? And let's see, 82% of the viewers agreed with you.
Interesting.
Where were they when I was running for office?
One thing that also struck me during the debate was how often Congressman Young talked about, I did that, I did that, I did that. Les, did you find that to be accurate?
It was not accurate. Lisa Murkowski got ANWR opened more than anybody else, not Don Young. It happened in a Senate bill. What he did was he served for 48 years, and we still have over 70 communities without law enforcement. What he did was serve for 48 years, and we still have not put the honey bucket in the Museum of History. We still have communities in Alaska that have sanitation like a second and third world country. That is not acceptable. So it's what I didn't in 48 years. And on this whole thing on debate style, we're not, and I'll take everybody else's word on the debate style. I'm not good at judging who won a debate. What I want somebody to do when they represent me in Congress is enact good policies. I don't want somebody to strip away my right to health insurance that supports my right to get coverage for pre-existing conditions. That's what Don Young would do. I don't want somebody who will kick off every single child up to age 26. So from age 18 to 26, they're covered by health insurance right now. Don Young voted to strip that health insurance coverage away. I don't believe that when you've got a pandemic, it's okay for somebody to walk around and make fun of it and call it a beer virus and hold a fundraiser where nobody wears masks. I mean, you're also supposed to be a role model. So if you want to vote for somebody who has a debate style you like, that's fine. But I want to vote for somebody who wants to make this a better country. And taking away health coverage from 26 and 25 and 24 and 23-year-old kids during a pandemic, or young adults during a pandemic, is not what I want. Somebody who still hasn't solved the lack of law enforcement and the lack of clean water and sanitation in Alaska is not what I want. It's the policies. It's whether or not we get this toxic pebble mine, which Don Young wants, or whether we preserve the world's greatest salmon fishery, which I want and Ms. Galvin wants. The policies should matter to people, I would say, and not the debate style. And I'm terrible at rating the debate style.
Ryan, what do you think of that?
I think that one thing, and like Andrew was saying on some of the doors that were open, one of the biggest that I saw was she mentioned telehealth. And especially in a pandemic right now, that's a very bipartisan issue. And that was something I really perked up when she mentioned that that's something that we need to expand on, but she didn't really go into details. And I think that is something that she really could have probably won some people over on, because especially up in rural Alaska with the pandemic going on, that is something that's been a real big issue for a lot of people. And so I kind of wish she had done a little bit more on that. I think the congressman, again, he really had to defend his position on being an effective congressman, because that's really what she came out with, was saying he's done. He's no longer effective. He's no longer doing anything. He's basically just sitting there not doing anything. And I don't think that's true. I think he's been very effective. I think that's why Alaskans continue to vote for him. And so I think that the issue, they needed to stick, he did a good job of sticking with issues, what he's done, what he's helped with. And I think that's what people really care about, is what are the facts, what are the issues, what are you going to specifically do? And while she alluded to, she wants to create more jobs, she wants to make sure businesses thrive, she wants healthcare, education, she didn't exactly say how she would do that. And I think people want to really, especially right now with schools going online, with the pandemic really creating a lot of havoc on everyday people and voters, they want to know how you're going to do that. It's not enough to just say, that's what I want. They want to know specifics, and I don't think she gave that tonight.
Well, and I think you could really argue that on both sides. I mean, one of the things that always makes my ears perk up is, how Don Young, he switched from one breath talking about the national debt and how he thinks this is wrong, we shouldn't be spending money, to the next thing about, well, we need to be doing this and I'm doing this and we need to pay for this. And so some of his comments are contradictory. I mean, I don't believe Don Young, when they're not in power, everybody's for low national debt. When they are in power, we got to spend money, right? I mean, so there's a little bit of space in both. But I think when you talk about debate style, I think it's important to realize that when candidates show up at debate, they all have something to accomplish, right? Don Young's goal tonight was not to fall over in his chair. I mean, that was really his goal. He's ahead in the race. People know he's a known quantity. He just has to show up and be irascible Don Young. Alyse, on the other hand, she's down in the polls. She has to show up. She has to cut through the clutter. She has to deliver cogent, clear, concise arguments that connect with the demographics that she's lacking in. And one of those demographics is, surprisingly, is 18 to 44. I mean, Young is up. Young leads that demographic in their race by 3 points. Now, you think about 18 to 44. So when you had that young Alaskan that was on the screen asking the question about, Gen Z and millennials being the biggest population group, that was a great opportunity for her to talk about her vision about, you know, student loans and economic opportunity and these kinds of things. But instead we went off into some flowery dissertation about how you're the seed corn and you're the, you know, future of the world. I mean, yes, we know that, but, you know, so the candidates showed up tonight having two different goals. I think Don Young accomplished his by not falling out of his chair. And Alyse Galvin, I believe she had several doors open that she just couldn't capitalize on.
I would say, having watched her 2 years ago, I would say that, and I've watched her in a couple of small group settings, that she is better now at the debate format. I mean, you can see some improvement over 2 years. It's interesting to see someone, you know, progress like that. And then, you know, she does make the case better in a small group setting. It's pretty clear that this is not her forte for a format, which is unfortunate because, you know, in politics there's a lot of debates.
I guess, Les, you know, we talk about connecting with voters, and when you've been out, and for anybody taking on Don Young, who's kind of notoriously hard to win against, how is it that somebody could unseat him, Republican or Democrat?
I think you have to talk about what you're going to do for the country and what you're going to do for Alaskans. And I guess I am not one that says debate style is the reason why you vote for or somebody. It's what the person will do for the country. She and Don discussed the one thing that could have helped the small businesses in the state, and it's all COVID related, and that's the HEROES Act. The HEROES Act would have helped small governments that are struggling. That's across Alaska and across America, where governments are not taking in tax money because nobody has any money to pay in taxes, where businesses are failing, where restaurants are failing, where schools need money to pay for PPE and the things you need to keep students and parents and teachers safe. And Don Young voted against that on the ground that it gave too much money to other states, those bad cities. That's not how you govern. You have to work with other legislators. I think that was maybe the biggest difference between the two, and the reason why the restaurants in the state and the bars in the state and the small and local governments that are struggling in the state are not getting what they need, because you have a congressman who says, I don't want to help our communities because I don't want to help those bad cities. That is not the way you play in the sandbox. And I think I agree with Andrew that on the debate style, she could have done better, but I don't vote on style. I vote on who's going to represent me in Congress. And on those issues, we've got an economic fallout coming out for our small businesses and our small governments, and it's not a good enough excuse to say you didn't help because you didn't want to help other cities.
And that was true. He did say that about the HEROES Act. But I would say that his reputation nationally and in Congress is that you know, he wants to bring back earmarks. When he was chairman of transportation, there was a lot of money going to a lot of places. So that is not how he's governed in the past, although that definitely was his rhetoric tonight.
Ryan, you want to take that on?
Yeah, I think in this act specifically, when the pandemic really hit, and Congress had to scramble for a bill, and it wasn't a perfect bill. It had a lot of things in it that didn't actually relate to COVID at all. But I think both sides realized that something had to be done, and so they did pass the first round of stimulus money. A lot of things got slipped in there, things that shouldn't have, money going to Harvard, money going places that really had no right to collect taxpayer money, but something had to be done. But on the second round here, they needed to clean it up. And again, the bill that came out of the House was just loaded with money for bailouts, and that's, again, what he was talking about with the other larger cities. It wasn't a population thing. It was they were asking. New Jersey asked to use COVID money to bail out their pension reform. That has nothing to do with COVID specific. And so while I agree with Les, yes, we need to get money back in for the small businesses that are hurting, for the shutdowns that are happening around, including the city of Anchorage that's been really impacted by that. But to just vote on this thing that is has so many components that have nothing to do with COVID, and on the second round, when they had time to clean it up, they had time to fix the mistakes that they made the first time around, it would have been irresponsible to vote for it. And I think Congressman Young did the right thing in voting against this and saying, hey, you need to bring something to the table that is just dealing with COVID and not dealing with a bunch of other stuff that has nothing to do with the pandemic.
Andrew, we'll give you the last word. Do you think any minds were changed tonight, or did everyone leave with the same impression that they came in with?
Debates don't change any minds, and it gets back to what Les said. You know, I mean, it's easy for us to sit here. First off, we're not on stage on TV debating, so we're here in the comfort of this studio, you know, being able to have 20/20 hindsight. I don't think it changed any minds. I think people, you know, watch debates. I mean, unless something dramatic happens, I don't think it changes any minds at all. But that still doesn't mean in the next 7 to 10 days that both Representative Young and Alyse need to get out there and, you know, fine-tune their closing message.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for tonight. Liz and I, as well as our panelists, will be back tomorrow night to talk about the race for the U.S. Senate, which will be exciting. Beth Verge also is back here at 10 o'clock tonight for your latest newscast. We will see you back here tomorrow.